Hey, so I wanted to talk a little bit about what's going on with this whole COVID-19 pandemic and economics. I say in class all the time that economics is all around you, and you just have to kind of look for it or train yourself to look for it. And it's interesting because a lot of the models we're talking about in class can be used to kind of understand real world what's happening right now. So I'll make this quick, but it's just an exercise and again applying what we're talking about in class to the world around us. So let's start with February 2020. So, and I pulled, this is actual data I pulled off of the FRED, the Federal Reserve Economic Data website. But in February, so a month and a half ago, what was the state of the economy? Well, the short-run economy was producing a level of real GDP, about $19.2 trillion, which, ain't bad, right? The potential, as it turns out, though, full employment potential was about 19.1 trillion. So there was actually about $100 billion inflationary gap that we were experiencing because the output in the short run actually exceeded the long-term potential. And in a condition like that, you would expect unemployment to be down, and it was, right? Unemployment was running about 3.5%. And production was up. GDP was doing pretty well. It was I don't know, 2.5, something like that. And all in all, pretty good. And then the virus hit, right, or the pandemic hit. What happens? How can we understand what happens? Well, the easiest way to understand it is we know that aggregate demand, what's spent, what's expended by the sectors of the economy, right, includes consumption spending by households, investment spending by firms, and then, of course, government spending. Well, what happened? To use your own personal experience, what happened? A lot of people have lost their jobs. A lot of people have been, are facing reduced employment. And so this consumption spending fell way, way down, right? Stores closed. I mean, we're all living the same La Vida Loca right now in terms of what it's like to go shopping or deal with consumption spending. So consumption spending is way down. Business investment, way down. And so what effect does that have? And of course, of those three sectors, I hope you know that the consumption spending by households is by far the biggest, right? So with this drop off in consumption, what's happened? Well, it's shifted aggregate demand way over to the left. So literally overnight, this is fascinating to me, but literally overnight, we went from a inflationary gap to a recessionary gap. Which is not to say the economy's in a recession. We won't know that till the data comes out later. It'll be after the fact that economists go, hey, look at that. We were in zero or negative GDP growth for 2 consecutive quarters. Yep, turns out we had a recession back in, whatever, March, April, or whatever it's going to be. It's probably a good guess that the economy now is in a recession, but we won't know that until the official statistics are released. But now, and I don't know, I haven't looked up, I haven't been able to find what the exact output of the economy is, but we know that it's less than the potential because of the reduced consumption. So what responses are there? So this is where sometimes I get the question, Mr. Dixon, you talk about the classical school and the Keynesian school and who's right. It's really not that easy. To a certain degree, both schools have validity, and then both schools have things that their models work pretty well. And so the short answer I'm going to give you is they're both kind of right? I mean, the classical school, in the long run, the economy does tend to move towards equilibrium in terms of the business cycle. So, left alone or with minimal input from the government, the economy it is amazing. You can look the graphs up on FRED, and maybe I'll do another video where I actually show you this. But you can bring the graphs up in FRED, and you can see over the long run, the economy does trend towards equilibrium. So in that sense, the classical school is right. The problem the classical school has is that in the short run, you got families hurting. you have people hurting, businesses hurting. It's very difficult as a politician to just say, yeah, well, just stand by, it'll fix itself. So in that respect, the Keynesian perspective or approach enjoys a lot of political support because it's great to be able to stand up and say, hey, look, we have the stimulus spending. I mean, think about this: the stimulus spending, right, is all about increasing government spending to try to shift aggregate demand. The checks, the stimulus checks. So a lot of you or a lot of people may be getting I guess $1,200 checks in the mail here pretty soon. What's that all about? Well, think about it. The government cannot. Oh, sorry, that was my pen. The government cannot force you to go out and spend money, right? They can't say, okay, come on, Dixon, we're going to go, buy some more guitars or something like that. But what they can do is they can send you $1,200 in hopes that you'll go out and spend that. And that's all about trying to spur this and, again, shift aggregate demand over to the right. Tax, the supply side sort of side to it, or kind of the neoclassical response is less about stimulus spending and things like that, and more about taxes. If you lower payroll taxes, if you lower different types of taxes, not only does that tend to affect aggregate demand, but it really, in their model, affects short-run aggregate supply, and you shift that back over to the right. And so, again, it's fascinating to look at what's happening right now in the news, with the government and the political establishment, and be able to understand it in terms of why they're doing what they're doing. Things get politicized. I get that, and I try to, as much as possible, keep politics out of my lectures, out of my classroom, really out of my life. But it is interesting to see and to understand why certain politicians do what they do. President Obama, again, the economists he was working with, heavily vested in the Keynesian school, so you did see a lot of stimulus spending and a lot of government response. Again, I kind of said this before, but I'll say it again. The problem that a Republican president or Republicans have is that they tend to be more associated with the classical school, but you can't just stand up in front of the microphone and say, look, we're not going to do anything, right? So President Nixon had this great quote that I don't know if he actually said it, but it was attributed to him, that said, yeah, we're all Keynesians now. And if you think about it, that's funny, but it's poignant, right? So this would have been in the early 70s, where he recognized, like, look, you can't stand up and say, just stand by, the economy will fix itself. And so you typically do even see Republicans engage in stimulus spending and some of the increase in government spending programs. But anyway, this is kind of a bonus. It's just kind of to help you kind of understand and process what's going on around you. So I'll wrap it up here, but expect to see, in the coming weeks and the coming months, as things taper off and the things kind of get back to semi-normal. I don't know how normal they'll be, ever again. I'm kind of thinking handshakes are gone. We may do a lot of like virtual, hey, how's it going? But I'm thinking the old handshake is out of here now. But anyway, as things sort of get back to normal, pay attention to what you see in terms of policy solutions, and again, applying to some of the things we're talking about in class. Okay, so hope you're safe. Hope you're doing well. I hope that Canvas hasn't been too difficult to navigate, and I hope this format has been useful for you versus Zoom. I looked at Zoom and participated in some Zoom activities and wasn't a fan. So anyway, I'm going to cut it off now and say good night.